many things that affect a particular business, and businesses are affected through external factors day in, day out. It could be either political, environmental, anything, but businesses are always impacted by various environmental factors, and even external factors that widely affect the business. So we have basically got into this phase whereby we have 40% of small businesses that do not have a business continuity plan, which I feel in this day and age is very disruptive for a business, because you need to know how you're going to take this business over. You need to be able to, have a plan. Where do you want this business to go? Where do you see it? How are we contributing to that? And it's unfortunate that through also, this research that we've done, we also found out that 2/5 of small business enterprises, they do not even reopen after a disruption or a disaster. So we all know COVID, it really impacted us quite majorly. And I feel during the COVID time period, that is when people really came to, trying and understanding that how can we get a turnaround strategy for this, because nobody anticipated COVID, nobody knew that was coming, but here we are. And I mean, the last thing you want is your business for your business not to reopen after it's already been disrupted. So what we need to do is make sure that we have this plan which factors in, it has all of these recovery strategies, that in case of an impact, and also we're able to measure, is the impact big, is the impact low? So we'll be able to get into all of that with our very able speaker. So quickly, I will take you through the layout of the webinar. So in the first phase, we're going to have the introduction. Second phase, we're going to understand what business impact analysis is. The third phase, we're going to look into the business analysis process. And the fourth phase, we're going to do the business analysis focus. And the fifth is the outro. So in this webinar, we anticipate to take 1 hour and 20 minutes. And for house rules, all of your mics are muted. So we kindly urge, if you do have any question that you would like to ask the speaker, we would be happy to take them, but kindly write them on the Q&A section. And after that, during the Q&A session that we will have later after the speaker is done presenting, then we shall be able to answer those questions. Yeah. So today's speaker is the co-founder of Sentinel Africa, and she's the Business Continuity Institute East Africa Forum chairperson. So she's the founder and the lead consultant with Sentinel Africa as a risk consultant, and she is a strategy expert, champion of women in the workplace. She has experience in government, parastatals, NGOs, financial services, banking, security, and she is a qualified business continuity senior lead implementer and auditor. She also has her lead risk manager and among other various certificates. And she's an international speaker and trainer and curriculum developer for the business, for the BSI and PCB and Certitrust Institutes. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker on board, and she can now take over and we can get into the content now.
Thank you so much, Urvi, for that lovely introduction. And I can see quite a lot of people have joined. What an exciting time. I'm happy this afternoon to be taking you through this webinar covering business impact assessment. So I can see a lot of people who have said this is their first time. A lot of people who have said, I want to be able to understand how other people do it. I want to improve my process. So to be able to do that, I have organized the webinar in a certain way. I used the 4 W's and a H approach. So I'm going to start off with what exactly a business impact analysis is and why is it important. I will then go into who does it, who should be involved, and then when should you actually do it, and how often should you do it, and then where. So if you're looking at the scoping, how do you decide these things are in scope, the rest are out of scope? And then finally the how, just looking at what exactly is the process, and common pitfalls. I won't necessarily follow the, just this flow, but you will get to understand, all these elements. So if we go to our beginning, during COVID and during a number of crises, this is what our management teams go through. So the first thing is denial, let's just wait and it will all be over. COVID lasted with us for 2 years, and several other crises have, been there for quite a while. Yeah. Then anger. So how dare anyone criticize? We are the victims. Yeah. So if you look at some of the organizations, when they suffer a crisis, their first thing is saying, why is it that you're not feeling pity for me? I have suffered XYZ. I am in a crisis. So don't ask me, how I'm going to carry out my services for you. We are in a crisis here. Yeah. Then bargaining. So you start to realize that no one cares that you're in a crisis, and everyone has this expectation that you will still provide your services even if they're in a crisis. Yeah. So you'll have people who are shouting on your Facebook wall, your Twitter wall. Your reputation basically will be slandered at this time. Then the depression comes in, because it becomes apparent that, am I really gonna survive this? Will my brand really survive this crisis? And then acceptance, where you say, okay, the worst has happened, and we need to find out what can we do. Do we apologize? Do we get our lawyers involved? So this is typically, when you're not prepared, what happens. So if we go into the next slide, we can see that when you look at a business impact analysis, you'd ask yourself, what exactly am I doing here? So I'd like to just tell you a short story. I love spaghetti bolognese. So I was at home, and I wanted to go out into the supermarket and buy spaghetti bolognese. So the supermarket is just like 15 minutes from my place, and I entered this supermarket. It's one of the most modern supermarkets in Kenya, and there is a total blackout. So at this point, I can see a lot of employees milling around, waiting for the lights to come on. So I was like, okay, there is a blackout, but I still need my mincemeat. So let me go over to the fridge. So I go over to the fridge, and the attendant is there, and I tell him, okay, I would like some mincemeat. So he's like, I can't serve you the mincemeat because I can't measure the mincemeat. Basically what had happened was the power was off, and because of that, the alternative power had also packed up. So I asked him, so you can't measure the mincemeat? Can you as well is this mincemeat going bad if this power outage lasts for a while? So he's like, no, the power, the fridge itself is on solar power. So we have backup power for the fridge, which is not dependent on our generators. But for the measuring machine, then they didn't have backup power. So what can that tell us about doing a business impact analysis? So probably when this organization was doing a business impact analysis, they looked around and they said, okay, we one of the risks we face is a power outage. But when a power outage occurs, or rather, when certain, if we were to stop being able to being able to refrigerate meat, what would be the impact? They would then go and say, if we were to stop refrigerating, let's say, ice cream or milk, what would be the impact? If we were unable to stock shelves, what would be the impact? If we were unable to measure and price the meat, what would be the impact? And if we were unable to offer people a service, a till service, to be able to pay for their goods, what would be the impact? Now, what you realize is that the impact of a failure in any one of these activities for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes, for 1 hour, for 5 hours, the impact is different. Yeah. So if the fridge fails for 1 hour, you'd probably not be in serious problems. But if the fridge fails for 5 hours, then basically you start being in serious problems. If the measuring machine fails for 10 minutes, I was not able to get the service, but probably they had not done an impact analysis to understand that that measuring machine should have been on a UPS. So a BIA simply identifies the business continuity requirements and provides information for the most appropriate business continuity solutions. So it identifies the urgency of each activity undertaken by the organization by assessing the impact over time. So note that it's not just the impact, but the impact over time. So you want to know the impact as at hour 1, you want to know the impact as at hour 2, hour 5, after 5 days, because the impacts pile up. The disruption, the impact of a disruption piles up. So now when we look at this specific situation, if we look at when you are doing a business impact analysis and the risk assessment, if you can go to the next slide, please. You would see that such an organization might identify a power outage as a potential event. And then from that potential event, then identify what would be the risk mitigations that they could be able to take into place to manage that event. Those could be like having a backup power, having solar powered refrigerators, and so on, so forth. So your business impact assessment helps you to understand, okay, so first of all, I need to understand the impacts over time of the different activities that I undertake. And thereafter, I need to do a risk assessment, and I need to understand what are the risks that I face and how can I then mitigate those risks. So if we can go to the next slide. There are different types of business impact assessments that you can do. So the first and most basic type is an initial BIA. During an initial BIA, what you can do is, at this time, you are pressed for time and you want to just be able to look at your organization from a high level perspective and think through what is it that my organization does. In the aspect of a supermarket, you might say, we provide goods and services, we provide shelf services, we provide advertising for our suppliers, we provide we have HR, and you do a simple impact analysis which will help you before you now go into the detailed BIA. The second type of BIA that you can do is a product or service BIA. So rather than looking at it from an organization-wide perspective, you look at it from a product or service perspective. So you can say, I have this service, maybe I have mobile banking as a service. So then you look at mobile banking and say, what is it that I need to do, or what are the activities that I do concerning this service? And thereafter, rate those activities. Then you can do a process BIA. So with a process BIA, then you go and you put high-level processes. So you can say human resource processes, accounting processes, deployment processes, training processes. So from a high level, then you can be able to do a BIA from that level. You can also go up until the activity level. So if you're looking at something like a training process, what are the activities that you do within the training? So probably you advertise the training, you carry out the training, you do training feedback, you close the training, maybe you examine participants. Those are activities within that process. So then you can basically rate them based on the activities. So you can see that progressively, the different types of BIAs provide a deeper level of understanding about the organization. So depending on how mature your organization is, you might have started off with an initial BIA, and you're moving progressively towards having a more activity-based BIA, where you'd be able to know, to be able to provide, to be able to sell meat in my supermarket, I need to be able to stock the meat, I need to be able to pack the meat, I need to be able to weigh the meat, and you have an impact analysis for all those different activities. We can move on. So if you look at a business impact assessment, business impact analysis, you can use the PDCA cycle. So that's the Plan, Do, Check, Act, to actually do a business impact assessment. The PDCA cycle can be used for any type of project you have. So the PDCA talks about, how do I plan this out? How do I then implement it or do it? How do I check and monitor to confirm that it's actually working as I thought? And then how do I continuously improve? So from a planning perspective, you will do three main things. So first of all, you'll determine the scope. And we're going to look at how that is going to be done. Then you will determine the method, because as many people, even from the participants who have joined in have said, is that I have done a BIA before, but I want to know how other people are doing it. So there are different methods you can do it. You can have done an initial BIA, you can have done an activity-based BIA, you can have done, you can have set out a procedure that has certain steps. And then during the planning, you'll also have to identify the participants. Second is, you will go into the do phase. Now in the do phase, once you have planned out what you're going to do, you have to go and again, actually do it. So you will map the key processes, the key activities, their dependencies. You'll determine the impacts over time. You'll perform a risk assessment. And based on the impact over time, you'll calculate a recovery time objective, RTO, and a maximum tolerable period of disruption. I will talk a bit about how that is done. You will then validate the BIA and you will sign it off. During the checking phase, so the BIA has been done, so when that crisis occurs, you know this is the priority of activities I need to recover. So if you're a supermarket, you know, okay, I need to recover till services within 10 minutes of a crisis. I need to recover measuring of meat within 15 minutes of a crisis. I need to recover the fridge within 1 hour of a crisis. So during the actual crisis, then you can check and see, was my impact analysis actually accurate? Are there some things that I made assumptions about that actually when it comes to a real crisis, there are some things that I need to change? So you monitor during an actual activation as well as during testing. Then you continuously monitor and you plan for improvement. So if we go into the planning, and you can move on to the next slide. So planning the BIA is about understanding what is it that I am going to do at a minimum, and then what is it that is out of scope. So when you look at an organization, there are various activities that that an organization performs, and sometimes the need for a BIA is informed by your regulator, it is informed by a key customer, it is informed by maybe the board. Yeah. So where is that need coming from? And because of that, where do I want to start to focus on? So where you have time, where you have resources, I would recommend that you do an activity-based BIA, and you do it across the organization. Where probably you have constraints of time, you have constraints of resources, and also there are some particular requirements which are coming out from your regulators, your customers. Then you can scope the BIA, and you can scope it in relation to a number of maybe departments, maybe products and services. It all depends on you. Now, in scoping the BIA, if you remember, we said that you have to decide the method. So what are you going to do? When you say that you are going to rate your impacts over time, what type of impacts are you going to use? Are you going to use financial? Are you going to use reputational? Are you going to use operational? So those are some of the impacts over time that you have to consider. And within those impacts over time, you would decide that certain levels, based on your risk appetite, would then necessitate certain impacts being escalated. So when we look at, and we can go to the next slide. When we look at doing a BIA, and we look at it from an activity-based perspective, you would have, what are the primary activities that you're carrying out? In Sentinel, we do several primary activities: managed services, projects, training. We have a commercial website. Then we have the support activities of business development, customer service, ICT. All this represent our support services. So we would do a BIA across the primary services, and then we would also do a BIA across the support services. And out of that, we would come up with what is it that is critical for Sentinel Africa as a business from an activity perspective. We can go to the next slide. All right, so once you have understood the planning part, then you go ahead and you implement your BIA. So in implementation of the BIA, there are 6 steps. So the first is mapping the key processes, activities, and their dependencies. So if I'm looking at something from Sentinel Africa perspective, I'm looking at training. I would look at, for training, what are the activities that I do? So I perform certain activities to advertise the training. I then have logistical support to make sure that when the training is happening, we have the training rooms, we have the training materials. I prepare the trainer, and then I have the post-training activities. So those are the activities that I have. Now, what is the impact over time of not performing those activities? So I might start off with advertising. The impact over time of probably the advertising of a training can delay for even a week without negative impacts on myself. But say if a training is ongoing and I'm unable to recover the training process within 1 hour, already I would have start to suffer negative reputation with the customers who have paid for that training. Then second step is determining the impact over time of not performing those processes. So then I would then map out and say this would be the impact in hour 1, in hour 2, in hour 3, and so on and so forth. Then performing a risk assessment and identifying key threats and vulnerabilities. So for something as simple as a training process, you could find that one of the key threats would be if I don't have stable internet. One of the key threats could be if I don't have stable power. A key threat would be a fire at the location where I am training at, yeah? So then I would do a risk assessment against those threats and find out what is it that I have to mitigate the threats. I remember one time going to do a training at a certain hotel, and unfortunately, the TV was not on UPS. So the lights were on UPS, but the TV that I was using to basically present my material was not on UPS. So that was disruptive to the training. So again, looking at that process and what did we need to do, or what did that hotel need to do, that wasn't holistically done. So based on the impacts over time, you can then calculate something called the recovery time objective. So the recovery time objective is the time following a disaster that you want to recover. Now, the maximum tolerable period of disruption is the time at which the impacts which result from that crisis would be unacceptable. So in the case of a supermarket, you might say, if I have meat in a fridge and the fridge has been cooled at a certain temperature, I can be able to survive 1 hour or 2 hours with the meat, with the fridge not having been powered on, because it has already reached a certain temperature and it is maintaining that cold temperature. If it goes beyond that, then you find that meat starts going bad, and I start to get, basically I have to throw out that meat. So you want to recover that process of the fridge or cooling of the meat before, within a certain recovery time objective. And if it goes beyond that objective up till your MTPD, then at that point you have a total loss. So the fifth step on implementing the BIA is validating the BIA. So we could have done a very good process, but the BIA is affected by who is in the room. So if, for example, I have very junior people who are helping me to do the BIA, they might not have an overall view of the business. They might not be giving me the best data to be able to do a proper BIA. So I need to have the BIA validated at a departmental level so that somebody senior can look at the results of the BIA and say, yeah, based on what you have come up with and the objective of this assignment, I think you have come up with a valid BIA. From there, we would take the BIA for sign-off, and this would be done by your management. Typically, the CEO signs it off. In some cases, the board will sign it off, and that basically says this is an agreement of what it is our critical activities are, and going forward in a crisis, it would form a guideline of which are the activities we need to recover fast and why. So we can move on to the next slide. So just looking at a sample of something of a BIA, this would be typically the information you collect. So you'd have the department, you'd have the process or activity name, you'd have what is it that process is about, who is responsible for it, any parties that support that process. You would have any systems or hardwares that support the process, and as well suppliers that support the process. Then you would then go ahead and do an impact over time analysis. So you'd say, in the first 1 hour, if I don't have the staff welfare working during a disruption, what is the impact? Is it critical? Is it minor? Is it not critical? Yeah. And you would go ahead and do it for the different time slots. So typically you would have a method that involves you saying, In the first 0 to 1 hour, this is the impact. In the second 1 to 2 hours, this is the impact. So you then go graduating the impact until the time it reaches an intolerable impact. Now, based on that, you would say, okay, based on my assessment, then this is your intolerable impact. So we can go on to the next slide. So what are some of the risks that you need to consider when you're doing a BIA and when you then subsequently do a risk assessment? So you would think about several risks. So scenarios involving building. So if this building is not available, could I be able to do this training elsewhere? The example of training. Scenarios which are involving utilities. So things like power, things like water, yeah? So scenarios involving communicating systems. So especially where you have, like, for example, a call center, you have an email desk, you have a website where people interact with you. Scenarios involving computer systems, so unavailability of a particular system. Scenarios involving consumables, so where, for example, a supplier is unable to offer you the consumables you require, or a consumable element fails. Scenarios involving people, where, for example, people are not available, or scenarios involving information or data. So those would be some of the main categories, not conclusive, but also these are some of the things you would consider when you do a risk assessment. We can move on. So just to explain further on some of the key terms, when you do a business impact assessment, you will be able to understand you have rated an activity and you have rated the impact over time. So you want to look at, if you look at this event or disaster, at what point at what point do I expect to be able to recover a certain process? So as we said, in the example of a supermarket, you might say, within 1 hour, I want to be able to recover my fridge services. Now, the maximum tolerable period of disruption or maximum tolerable downtime is the required recovery. So that is the recovery after which unacceptable consequences start to happen. So unacceptable would be people start to die, or even the business reputation is so badly affected. So you might say, for fridge services, I want to recover within 4 hours. Now, if you're looking at something like a banking service, typically you want to be able to go to your bank and you want to be able to withdraw cash without any problems, from mobile banking, from internet banking, etc. So typically they would have a recovery time objective of even 15 minutes, 10 minutes. But at what point is it that you would say, based on the fact that this bank has been down for 1 day, let's say in an example, I am closing my account, or I am reporting to the regulator, and the regulator would give that bank a fine that would actually severely affect that business. So when you're trying to look at RTO is the expected recovery. MTPD is the point at which the impacts become unacceptable to the business. Now, during your business impact analysis, you will also determine something called a recovery point objective. So recovery point objective looks at the element of the data. So especially where, for example, you have a system. Let's say you have an ERP system or an enterprise resource planning system. So that enterprise resource planning system may suffer some sort of data loss. So let's imagine that there's a corruption of data. What would be acceptable as a backup So would you need to have a backup that is 1 hour before the disaster? Would it be acceptable to have a backup which is 1 day before the disaster? So the data loss or the recovery point objective looks at your acceptability in terms of data loss. Now, how is that acceptability governed? It is governed from a position of your business. So if you look at, say, typically a bank, a bank would have very many branches. You should have very many tellers who are inputting data, yeah? And a failure for even, like, let's say 3 minutes, yeah? Within 3 minutes, you can have had 100,000 records. So recreating that data is almost impossible. So that's why you will find that banks typically will have real-time replication to mitigate the risk of data loss. Now, looking at an organization such as ours, we typically have, let me say in a day, maybe we would raise something like 5 invoices. Now, 5 invoices, if I needed to recreate that data, it might not take me so much stress to recreate 5 invoices. If I had 5 suppliers, it's not taking me a lot of stress to recreate those suppliers. So I could typically say that I am comfortable with having a backup schedule that backs up my data every end of day, because my context is different from somebody else. I am comfortable with being able to recover or being able to recreate data in case of a loss within, within 1 day. Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, during your BIA, something you also have to determine is what is the acceptable data loss. So for activities that are supported by a system, you would rate it and say, for this activity, I would not accept any data loss. For a certain activity, I would accept up to half a day of data loss. For activity maybe X, I would accept up till 1 day of data loss. Now, what that does is that for the IT team, they take this data, and based on that data, they implement your backup strategy or your disaster recovery strategy. So typically what happens in most organizations is IT and the business continuity management system are totally separate, where IT will say, based on our budget, we are able to implement 1 day, or rather we are able to implement backups every end of day. But that might not be so effective for your business because it's not business-led. So the BIA process helps to bring a business-led approach towards your recovery, your disaster recovery strategy. Okay. We can move on to the next slide. Now, you've done your BIAs, you have done interviews with various stakeholders, you have validated the BIA, so you've taken the BIA results to your to departmental heads, they've looked at it, they have commented, they've said certain activities maybe need to be moved around. Now you need to get sign-off of the BIA. So management basically should receive a summary of the BIA results for validation. At this point, they are able to correct, they are able to make sure it's credible, it's consistent, it's complete and comprehensive. Ultimately, this document should be one that when a crisis occurs, this is the document you should actually bring out, and you should actually say, this is my guiding Bible in terms of saying, we've suffered let's say a flood. We need to recover activity A first, activity B second, activity C third, because of the way we had rated the criticality. You can move on to the next slide. So as you go along, you will find that the first BIA you document might not be 100% accurate. So especially as you go ahead and do your testing, as you go ahead and do your suffer crises and try and use that BIA, you might find that there are certain elements that needed to change, needed to be improved, and hence something you need to do is monitor the BIA. So typically, at least you should do a BIA annually to be able to get a sense of where you are, and this will help you to improve the BIA over time. If we can move on to the next slide. So lastly, I wanted just to bring out the issue of continuous improvement. So as I said, your BIA will not be perfect. And also as you go along, you will find that you will notice things that can be improved in your BIA. You will notice that there are opportunities to improve your impact analysis, to improve your ability to recover, and hence you have to have a continuous improvement mentality. So what that would involve is identifying the opportunities to improve, planning out how improvement can happen, executing that improvement, and then reviewing and improving the continuous improvement. You'll find that for most management standard business continuity, the ISO 22301 included, really focuses on continuous improvement, because the reality is we will not do a perfect job the first time, and it's only through doing this thing continuously that you actually start to see the benefits. So we can move on to the last slide. I think this is my last slide. I hope I've not taken too much time, not really. So what can I give you as a parting shot for people who have already done their BIAs, for people who are maybe starting off and are wondering, how do I do this? I'll start off with the yeses. So first of all, get training for your business continuity management champions. Champions are usually nominated from departments to help the business continuity managers implement the BIAs, and also from a management level, increase their competence. So let them know, why is it that we're doing this BIA? What is it informing, and how are they going to utilize it? That will help in them giving you better information, and especially when it comes to the validation perspective. Explain the objective, so let them know why. Yeah, adopt a learning mindset. So just know that you might not do it perfectly the first time, but as you go along and as you improve, then it will become much better. So pitfalls that usually befall people doing a BIA for the first time. So seeking perfection. Sometimes it's better to start off with a smaller scope than do a big bang approach. So that's sometimes helps when you just start off with a smaller scope. Start off with what's most essential, get that right, and move on to bigger things. Then having an overcomplicated BIA procedure. So again, there are very many ways you can do a BIA. You can read the ISO 22301. You can read the good practice guidelines by the Business Continuity Institute to give you more information. But ultimately, the procedure depends on you. It's customized to your environment. So don't have something that is too complicated that people can't understand and can't follow. Then performing the BIA without stakeholder involvement. So this is something that befalls our business continuity managers. You're pressed for time, or the business is not giving you audience. So what do? You go to your laptop and you just start typing out and saying, I think this impact is higher than the other. Yeah, that won't work. you will not get buy-in, you will not get ownership from the different stakeholders. Review your BIA. So just as I've put, the first time it won't be perfect, so every review makes it more perfect. Scoping, and then also sign off. So management involvement is key, and them understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how does this make business sense to them. So with that, I'll hand over to Urvi, who will do the coordination for me.
Well, 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 what a lovely presentation that was. I feel our speaker deserves a virtual round of applause, don't you think so? Let's give our speaker a virtual round of applause, please. Thank you so much, Stella. This was amazing. I hope everyone who had a set agenda to learn about business impact analysis were all able to go through the process, the procedure. Also, kindly don't worry. We will definitely share this recording with you, the valuable content that we got from our very, very able speaker here. So I'd like to leave the floor open for Q&A section. So if there are any questions, please, we'd be happy to hear them. Maybe you can write them down in the Q&A section, and then from there, our speaker will be able to answer them for you. Any questions? Do we have any questions anybody would like to ask about business impact? We would love to hear them.
So I'm seeing a question here, Uvi. I think this is Benson Karaoke. He's asked, as part of your, he's asked, yes, I have done this today. Would love to know how to automate and make the BIA process less tasking to the participating teams. So I think this is an interesting question. There are different softwares out there that can help you to automate the process. And yes, it becomes tasking. And, the problem with doing a BIA on Excel is you find that initially you will have developed a very good procedure, you have a very good Excel, and then progressively people will say, this part is too hard for me. So you find people deleting, people hiding cells, and it just becomes extremely, extremely complicated. So yes, there are tools out there that you can use to automate the BIA. We do have one that we sell commercially called ISO-Robot. And if you just ping us your email, we can set up maybe a private session where we take you through the tool.
Right. Thank you, Stella, for that. We can move on to the next question. Thank you for this insightful presentation. Kindly share with us the PowerPoint. Yes, we shall share a PowerPoint and the recording of this presentation as well. So be rest assured of that. Here we have Michael Kier, who asks, which one should come first, the BIA or the risk assessment?
Okay. So from a guidance perspective, in terms of the best practice standards, there is no particular order in which you need to do the two. So you can start off with doing a risk assessment and then do the business impact assessment, or you can start off with doing the business impact assessment and then do the risk assessment. But in my view, or rather, my preference is to do the business impact assessment first and then think through the risks. Why do I say that? Is the business impact assessment helps you to identify the activities that you are performing and the impacts of those activities. And it will help to give more focus to your risk assessment. So I don't really have a preference, or rather, I myself have a preference to do the BIA first, then followed by the risk assessment. But it is perfectly in order for you to do the risk assessment first and then the business impact assessment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stella. I hope, Michael, your question was answered. Secondly, we have so another question: are the departments responsible for carrying out their own BIA because they have seen cases where they leave it to the risk and compliance department?
All right. So what I always tell risk and compliance officers out there is you are a consultant to the business. Now, what is it that a consultant comes to do? A consultant works with the business to be able to get the most out of the business. So you are not responsible for doing the BIA on your own, no, but you have to work with the business. Most of the time, the business will not know what exactly a BIA is. They will not know what is the objective of this thing is. So in the first years, you will have to do a lot of hand-holding. I always recommend that train your champions and try and do at least a 3-day training where they actually leave their places of their normal day-to-day jobs, concentrate on this, show them what exactly is the business continuity management system, what is the BIA, how does it then input into their decision making during a crisis. If they're able to understand the objective and they're able to accept that this thing actually helps me to get into my strategic goal or to meet my strategic goal, then you'll get more buy-in from the departments. But risk and compliance basically play a coordinator role where they make sure that the BIA is being done consistently. It is being done using a standard process. It's being done using a standard method, and there's basically an escalation to it. So in this case, risk and compliance work almost as a consultant to the business.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Stella. I think we'll take the last question. So here we have another question. How often should a BIA be done?
Okay. In terms of how often, you would have to look at your organizational context. So there are certain organizations which change quite frequently. So you'd find that if I was doing a BIA for, let's say, Google, Google launch new products almost every other month or every other, let's say, quarter. Yeah, their product roadmap is quite dynamic. You may find that another organization like a supermarket might not change that often. So the determination of how often our BIA should be undertaken is actually based on your context. It is not cast in stone. And what you look at is what are the change factors. So if your organization is changing quite frequently, then you might want to look at your BIA almost quarterly to see, is this thing still valid? If your organization does not change that much, then you could push the BIA and say, I'm okay with having a BIA that is a year old. I would not recommend anyone to have a BIA which is more than a year old, simply because most organizations within 2 years or within 3 years, that BIA information will be quite stale. Yeah, even in terms of the people who are performing the process, the dependencies, suppliers who you depend on, that information needs to be kept up to date.
All right, thank you so much, Stella. So in the interest of time, I would urge everybody, if you have any more questions, kindly email them to info@sentinelafrica.co.ke. I have posted the email on the chat. So please, you can be able to send us any question that you may have regarding the webinar. If you may want to speak to a very able speaker today, please, write to us. So we would now proceed to a voting. We would love to hear from you, how this webinar was. I hope, next time, God forbid, if there's any case of a COVID, or if there's any other disaster, that we are or that we would be having in the future, we would be able to, use this knowledge that we have gotten today, and would be able to, put it to good use, actually be able to apply all of these things that we've learned, take it a step further. And we would be able to, first of all, identify and then measure how we're impacted and what we can do about it. And most of it all, we would love that, businesses are able to revive from that particular disaster and not just shut down. So I feel that right there is really, really important for us to be able to ensure that the businesses are there, up and running. So we would love to engage with you further. So we have a few last questions that we as Sentinel Africa would like to ask you. Would love to know whether you like the webinar. So I'd kindly urge you to please go on menti.com. So there you can be able to you can actually be able to put the code, and I've actually shared the link on the chat and here. So maybe you can click on that link, and then we can answer what we basically what would you like our next webinar to be? What is the next thing you'd love to hear? So maybe we could all respond there. I hope everyone is able to get the link. Maybe you all can, start and share what you'd like to hear. It could be in terms of information security or data protection, anything. What would you like the next webinar to be? So you can also go to menti.com, and then you can use the code. It's written right up here, 2661475. So the moment you input that code, you'll be able to respond to this particular question. Data protection, business impact and risk management. Okay, lovely. Crisis management. Okay, any others? You can write as many as you want. What is it that you'd like to hear? All right, so data protection is leading as of now. A lot of people want to hear about data protection. Then there's the business impact analysis masterclass. Okay, data protection still takes the lead. All right, so we'll give this a few more minutes, and then maybe we'll move on to the next one. Incident management. Very interesting one as well, right there. Emergency response. Wow, lovely, lovely. Still, I see data protection is still taking the lead. All right, few more minutes. Anybody, last minute, anybody would like to add anything? I see here there's new trends in BIA. Right. I feel that is another interesting conversation as well to have. Lovely. So I guess we can start moving to the next question now. Using the same link, you can still go, and I will now be able to share the next question. Okay, I can see. Here I can see. So how we can improve our next webinar. It was great. Thank you, Miki Chota. 45 minutes, right? Masterclass on business impact analysis. Big time for Q&A, right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate and value your feedback. We'll definitely keep this into consideration for next time. We'll be able to, work on all of these things. Any other points of improvement anybody may want to still add? Okay, so I guess right. I guess those were the points of improvements to be made, and we're happy to have this feedback from you, and we'll definitely keep it into consideration. So for all those people who have come in and joined us today, we're definitely going to take these points into consideration for next time, and please prepare. Next time we might you can also keep following us on our socials. So we'll definitely have probably a webinar or anything of interest that you may want. Along with that, we have our February training courses that we are offering, which is going to be from the 20th to the 24th of February. So the first one is the ISO 27001 lead implementer. So this is for ISMS. It will take place in Naivasha, Kenya, and also in Kigali, Rwanda. It's for 5 days, which is instructor led, also physical. And the other one is the ISO 27032, which is the lead cybersecurity. So if you do wish to take part in this particular trainings, you can please definitely get back to us. We also have a lot more other trainings for 2023, which we have created a training calendar. So please scan the code and you will get direct access to our training calendar. So from there, it will take you through all the trainings that we have. So from January to December along the year of 2023, all the trainings, you'll be able to see them there, and from there you can book directly. And please feel free, you can always engage with us. You can always let us know how you felt, and also in case you wish to book a training or in case you're facing any difficulty, you can definitely let us know and we'll be able to guide you with that. Here we have our email address. You can email us at info@sentinelafrica.co.ke, or you can even call us. So another thing that we've also added on our training is the self-study. So if you wish to, conduct the self-study mode, you can always please feel free to, get back to us. You can also search us on Google as Sentinel Africa, and we'll be there. You can also contact us and we'll be happy to help you. And with that, we can officially end the webinar. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending the webinar. We're very pleased to have you. Please be following us on our socials for our next and upcoming webinars to come. And also, as we promised earlier, we're definitely going to share this recording with you. I think there's a few people who wanted the PDF format. We'll also be able to do that as well. So we'll definitely share the presentation. So thank you so much and have a lovely day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any closing remarks from our speaker that we may have?
I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for coming out, and thank you for all the questions. I've responded to a few of them, but if you still require further feedback, would be happy to chat with you. You can chat with me on LinkedIn. If you search Stella Simi, you'll be able to get me, and I'm happy to engage in the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. We're really, really happy to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely day.
You too.